I work in a haunted retirement home for monsters. Our rules will give you chills. I never should have opened that door. I stood there, frozen, my hand hovering over the aged doorknob that felt like ice against my palm. The air around me was thick with anticipation, a chill creeping down my spine as shadows danced ominously in the flickering light. This was no ordinary retirement home. It was a place where stories whispered through crumbled walls and eerie creaks seemed to hold secrets long buried. Every morning, I would walk through the main hallway lined with photographs of villagers who once called this place home, faces twisted in strange, almost monstrous ways. These weren't just old people. They were creatures of legend, werewolves, mummies, and even a vampire who spent his days reminiscing under the dim glow of the antique chandelier. The scent of something foul lingered in the hall, like old earth after a storm. I could hear distant murmurs, voices that seemed to echo from another time, a blend of laughter and sorrow that hung in the cold, damp air. Shadows flitted just beyond my vision, teasing me to look deeper, to understand whatever was lurking in the corners. Each day, I would tell myself it was all in my head, but that dread kept building. One evening, while checking on the residents, a sudden crash made my heart race. A book flew off the shelf in the common room, pages fluttering wildly like a bird trying to escape. My breath hitched. Was it the wind? I thought, though I felt no breeze. The lights buzzed ominously. I glanced around, my pulse pounding loud enough to drown out the whispering voices. Probably just a draft, I muttered, but I could feel the shadows watching me. I turned, and that's when I noticed a figure standing at the end of the hall. The shape was indistinct, cloaked in a darkness that seemed to swallow any light that dared approach. My instincts screamed for me to run, but my feet were rooted to the floor. I squinted, searching for clarity, but the darkness blurred my vision. And then a whisper pierced the silence, a chilling, hollow sound that crawled beneath my skin. Come closer, it beckoned. My mind raced, battling the curiosity that lurked alongside the fear. What was it? Why was it here? As I stood there, the figure began to move. My heart thundered in my chest. I was caught between the urge to flee and the need to know. But then the door at the end of the hall slammed shut. I jumped, my breath hitching in my throat. I could feel sweat trickling down my spine, every sense heightened, every hair on my body standing at attention. The figure loomed closer now, its features becoming visible, or maybe it was just my imagination twisting reality. I was paralyzed. And then, just before the shadows consumed me completely, the figure raised a hand. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I staggered back, my pulse crashing like tidal waves against the shore of sanity. The figure's hand lowered, fingers elongated and grim in the faint light, sending icy tendrils of dread coursing through me. The shadows around it seemed to swirl and pulse like a living thing, hungry and alive. Come closer, the voice whispered again, more insistent this time, wrapping around me like cold steel. I couldn't discern if the sound filled the air or resonated within my own mind. Was it a plea? A command? I almost responded, inching forward, but the instinct to flee fought back with every breath. Suddenly, the residents' rooms. All were silent, but for the creaking of weary joints and the sounds of their long-decaying bodies shifting, yet I could feel their hollow eyes watching me through the closed doors. It was as if they were cages containing something alive, something malevolent. The figure took another step, and I blinked. It was closer now, more defined. An ancient, gnarled face emerged from the veil of shadows, features riddled with scars as if carved by the very essence of nightmares. Eyes that sparkled with an otherworldly shimmer locked onto mine, pulling me into an abyss where reason didn't exist. Then, I heard it again, a shuffling sound echoed from room 12, a shuffle culminating into a thudding noise. The door rattled violently, as if something trapped inside was desperate for release. I tore my gaze from the figure and turned. The sound wrapped around my heart, like a snake squeezing tight. I had to see what it was. As I stepped toward room 12, the figure's hand emerged from the shadows, almost as if to reach for me. "Stay," it hissed, the chill of its breath releasing a cloud of mist that danced through the air. That word sank into me, tethering me as I fought with a chaotic mix of fear and curiosity. I glanced back. The figure remained, an undulating mass of darkness, waiting, almost patient in its malevolence. The shuffling grew louder, more erratic, and my courage faltered. Yet compelled by a force I couldn't comprehend, I pushed the door to room 12 open. What I found inside made my blood run cold. The space was shrouded in shadows, but beneath the veil, I could see the gaunt figure of a resident the mummy. Wrapped in linen, she sat in a corner, her mouth opening and closing, moaning words I could barely grasp. "Help me. Let me go." I approached slowly, uneasy as I tried to decipher her pleas. The air turned dense, laden with sorrow and decay. Something whispered at the edge of my mind that this had to end, but the warmth of the figure's presence weighed on me. And then the lights flickered violently, drowning the room in periodic darkness. Each time the lights returned, her expression was more desperate, eyes pleading as if she saw something behind mesomething I could not. She gasped, clutching her wrappings, seeming to pull them tighter around her. "He's coming. You must run." Before I could process her warning, I felt the walls pulse, as if they were alive. I spun around, heart racing. The figure had vanished from the hallway. "Run," I whispered, gripping the doorknob as the shadows began to churn with malevolence. I had to escape. Just then, the shrieking sound burst from the hallway, reverberating against the walls, a cacophony of voices, a chorus of despair. I spun back to the mummy, but her eyes were wide with terror now, and she pointed behind me, her fingers trembling. "Run," but I froze, the door slamming shut, sealing me in with her, the walls suddenly shifting, closing around me like a trap. I could feel the sensation of something crawling along the edges of my vision. It wasn't just shadows anymore. And then I heard it, a voice behind me, deep, resonating, filled with rage. "You will not leave this place with that." The lights flickered one last time, plunging the room into an eerie silence. Something clawed at my back, and I could feel the pressure closing in, suffocating me as a cold breath crept up my neck. I was not alone. And then, before I could react, the door burst open once more, revealing a landscape of distorted faces and shadowy figures watching with ghastly delight. I gulped, my heart hammering madly, as the choir of voices crescendoed, drowning me in a swirling abyss of darkness. "Welcome back," they sang in unison, and everything went black. The stillness in the darkness lingered like an unwelcome stench, suffocating and thick. I felt myself suspended in a void, a momentary vacuum where time ceased to exist and the air became my enemy. It held me captive with each shallow gasp, an invitation to despair. "Welcome back," the voices twisted in my mind like serpents, enchanting yet grotesque, an incessant whisper trailing through the dark, as if the shadows themselves mocked my feeble attempts at survival. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperate to block out the phantoms that seemed to close in around me. But the cold clutches of terror held me firm, paralyzed like a deer caught in the gaze of death. It was all-consuming. Every pulse of fear that coursed through my veins was met with the hungry anticipation of the unseen horror lingering just out of sight. Images of the mummy and her pleas flooded my memory, but they were replaced by the grotesque faces that now swirled around me. I was not just in the company of the living or the dead, I was surrounded by something far more sinister. As they whispered my name, I felt their breath ghost against my skin, chilling me to the core. Through the blackness, I could make out fleeting shapes, features melting into one another amidst the shadows, weaving a tapestry of nightmares suspended in the air. Then, like a thunderclap echoing in an empty void, the lights flared back on, illuminating the room in a sickly glow that I stumbled back, wide-eyed at the chaos swirling before me. The figures blurred as they twisted and twined, limbs bending in unnatural ways. I could make out their forms, skeletal hands stretched toward me, eyes sunken into hollows dripping with malice. An abomination of souls entangled, whole yet fractured, despairing yet hungry. "Join us," they crooned in unison, their raspy voices weaving a hypnotic bond that made my skin crawl. The mummy's warning echoed in my Minda bond that would mean eternal servitude, lost within the folds of their darkness, never to escape the hell of their sinister embrace. That I turned back against the wall as dread threatened to consume me whole. The door loomed behind me, a narrow path to freedom, but I could feel their energy surging, shattering the air like glass, and the pressure of their collective will crushed my resolve. With each passing second, the cacophony grew louder, a manic symphony of discordant laughter and weeping that flayed my sanity raw. It became overwhelming, as if they were all laughing at my futile attempts to break free from their sickened grasp. Suddenly, through the din, a singular sound broke away, clear as a bell slicing through fog, the unmistakable sound of someone sobbing. I hesitated, drawn toward the eerie sound, which fought against the overwhelming din of the shadows. "Please help me." The voice was distant but unmistakable, laced with the desperation of someone who had lost everything. The mummy? I strained against the river of despair, fighting to reach the source of the sound. But as I struggled toward it, the figures lunged, their bony fingers grasping at my limbs like anchors pulling me under. "Stay with us," they screeched, their laughter boiling into a malevolent chant. "No," I shouted, forcing my way through, dodging hands that seemed to reach out of the very walls. I could feel their talons tugging against my clothes, hunting for a weak point to snag me. Just then, a light flashed, a sudden burst of brilliance that illuminated a path through the dark toward room 12, the mummy's cries emanating from there still echoing in my mind. I darted, fueled by instinct, propelled by the primal desire to escape this sinister incarceration. As I fumbled with the door handle, breathless and frantic, I felt a presence materialize behind me, hot and ravenous. I scrambled through, slamming the door shut and trapping the cacophony on the other side. The light flickered in room 12, illuminating the mummy's frantic eyes. "Why did you come back?" she rasped, her voice a mix of fear and urgency. "You must leave before it's too late. They're coming to take you too." Desperation clawed at my chest as the bleak truth set in. My reprieve was a mere illusion, and something far worse awaited me beyond the door. The wall behind her pulsed, and with it came an echo, the sickening sound of scrapes, claws tracing the edges, searching. "They know you're here," the mummy gasped. "They want your soul." But before I could ask what that meant, the door rattled, and a voice seeped through the splintered wood, dripping with anticipation. "You thought you could escape? We will feast on your spirit, beloved." That moment, the door burst open in a violent explosion, splintering apart, revealing a figure clad in shadows and malice, a void where its face should have been a detail lost in the swirling dark. "Welcome to your new home." And with that, I felt myself being dragged back into the abyss, consumed by the darkness that promised both welcome and damnation. The silence that followed was thicker than the darkness. I struggled against the unseen force, my heart thudding like a frantic drum, every instinct screaming for me to fight back. The entity's grip was cold and suffocating, like iron shackles forged in the void. Panic ignited within me, sparking wild thoughts of escape. But a sense of inevitability consumed my thoughts. There would be no fleeing the tide that pulled me under. "Help!" The mummy's voice was desperate, clawing at my sanity. "You will only make things worse." But it was too late. My body betrayed me, pulled inexorably towards the shadow. The room twisted around me, reality fracturing like shattered glass, colors bleeding into one another as screams erupted from the shadows. They were there, 1,000 voices softly weeping and howling, bubbling with rage and sorrow, each cry digging deep into my essence. As the dark entity began to unfurl, I glimpsed gleaming eyes, an intricate profile of torment birthed from centuries of despair. They watched me, hungry and expectant, as if I were the final sacrifice in some unholy rite. I could see their shapes crystallizing, a morbid masquerade of twisted forms, rough-hewn faces etched with long-forgotten anguish, and limbs that bent in grotesque angles, each a whisper betraying their previous lives. That I struggled, using every ounce of my will. My hands burned like fire as I gripped the doorframe, digging my nails into the splintered wood, a desperate lifeline against the intoxicating call of the shadows. "No, I won't join you," I screamed, the sound echoing against the walls, feeling feeble yet fierce in defiance. The creature before me shivered in response, a smile unfolding from the darkness, a maw lined with glittering teeth, starved and eager. "Oh, but you already belong to us," it hissed, voice a melodic dirge. "Your heart beats in rhythm with ours. You merely need to surrender." Their chanting grew louder, a tempest of noise, crystallizing into words, horrific tales of lives lost within the walls of the retirement home. Elderly souls yearning for warmth and companionship, but forever ensnared by the malevolent currents of despair that dwelled here. Each tale tugged at a deep-seated fear of my own inevitable fate, a reminder of mortality that intertwined with their dark essence. The mummy lunged, collapsing onto the floor at my feet, desperation etched upon her fading features. "They've consumed my years. My memories linger here, precious, but you are new, untouched. You can escape." Yet the darkness surged, drowning her out, wrapping around me like a heavy cloak as tendrils reached for my thoughts, inviting me to succumb. "Join us. Become one with our history. Feel the comfort of being forgotten." I let out a strangled cry as I felt their whispers weaving through my mind, their memories, their failures mingling with the echoes of my own regrets. Flashes of foreboding images spiraled through my consciousness, my hands aged and gnarled, my face a mask of loneliness in the mirror of time, a future bereft of love, of laughter. The life I clung to seemed to dissipate alongside my will. With a force born of utter despair, I yanked away from the shadows and stumbled back, colliding with the mummy's frail body. "You have to help me," I begged, breathless with terror, but when I looked down at her, her eyes were glazed, as if a veil had been drawn over them. She was slipping, succumbing to the call of the void that sought her. The shadows reached like claws, pulling her toward them, and I caught a glimpse of her pasta brilliant life dimming as she became a nameless part of this hellish masquerade. "No," I shouted, darting forward, but a thundering echo of laughter burst through the room, thick and dark as smoke, drowning out my cries. "We will not allow her to leave. Nor you." There was a crack of reality splintering, and everything reeked of burning anguish and sweet despair. From behind the shattered remnants of the door, hands clawed their way forward, pushing through the breaking darkness, dragging more cursed souls into the depths of the shadows that the cold. Fingers reached for me. I grabbed the mummy's hand, holding on tight. "Fight!" I yelled, but already I could feel her strength somehow escaping, her essence merging with the hungry void. The very walls trembled around us, vibrating with a resonant chant that echoed the lost memories of those who came before. But in a heartbeat, the tide of shadows whipped through the room, and I lost my grip. The mummy's gasp was cut short as she melted back into the dark, her last plea echoing in the abyss. "Save yourself," and then, in the wake of her departure, I found myself teetering at the edge of an unfathomable black pit. From its depths came a voice, twisted with many tones, both familiar and horribly foreign. "You thought you could escape, little one? You've merely chosen to dive deeper." A heartbeat later, an iron grip yanked me back into the suffocating darkness, an embrace that promised both terror and an eternal welcome. That I was falling downward into the depths, into all-consuming shadows, where the past and present intertwined, where all hope was swallowed whole. The fall seemed eternal. The cold air rushed past me, heavy and viscous, like a shroud of despair that wrapped itself tighter with each passing moment. I was not just falling. I was being drawn into a void where time and reality warped, an abyss churning with anguished whispers of countless souls lost in torment. Each breath tasted of rancid sorrow, punctuated by the damp stench of decay and regret. I landed with a thud, the impact jarring every bone in my body. The ground beneath me felt alive, pulsating like a heart full of malice. I lay there for a moment, confused, disoriented, before the piercing cries began to echo around me, a cacophony of voices pleading for release, for understanding. I struggled to my feet, breath quickening once more as the dark shapes began to coil around me, sliding silently from the walls, flitting in and out of my periphery like shadows in a nightmare. "Help us!" One voice cried. "We're trapped. Join us." Another beckoned with a seductive whisper. "Feel the power of our rage. Harness the pain of the forgotten." That I staggered backward as the walls shifted and bent, grotesque figures emerging with grim expressions carved into their murky visages. They encircled me, their stare both hungry and mournful. Among them, a gaunt woman with sunken cheeks and hollow eyes reached toward me, her skeletal fingers drawing near, trembling with desperation. "You're one of us now," she crooned, her voice like the brittle rustling of autumn leaves. "You can help us find peace that I I cried, shaking my head violently. "I won't be like you. I want to leave." But deep inside, a gnawing fear had settled. What if there was no escape? The mummy's warning replayed in my mind, a haunting echo amidst the cries of lost souls. As the shadows closed in, my heart raced, a battle waged between my desire to resist and the suffocating pull of despair that haunted each whisper. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the depths of the darkness, stepping forward with an eerie grace. It was dressed in elegant garb of a time long past, its features classically beautiful, yet marred by a veil of fatal melancholy. "You wish to resist?" it asked, tilting its head, an almost playful glint in its eyes. "Resist what? The fading of your own existence? The inevitable dance with eternity?" I could feel them encircling me tighter, their temperature dropping to an icy chill, as if absorbing the heat of my defiance. The darkness thickened, drowning out reality, blurring lines of what was tangible and what was succumbed to madness. And I managed to gasp, my breath misting into the opaque void. "I won't give in. You can't have me." Its laughter rang out in haunting waves, mingled with the other whispers as they swirled, forming a chilling chorus of despair. "Oh, but little flame, you've already left your mark. Every choice, every moment tethered you to our world. Feel it." And it happened then, the ground beneath me crackling like a storm, lightning bursting through shadows, illuminating grotesque faces contorted in agony, each scream more haunting than the last. They were remnants of lives once lived, preserved in a torment I couldn't comprehend. Rage boiled within me as I realized I was trapped in a cycling, endless loop of suffering. Time seemed to fracture around me, shifting into an unrecognizable blur. Visions flickered before my eyes, faded photographs of what appeared to be former residents of the home, their smiles plastered as if mocking my defiance. One face caught my attention, a woman with sorrowful eyes that drilled deep into my soul. I blinked, and in an instant, those eyes morphed into a reflection of my own anguished self, a future me stripped of hope and innocence, drawing closer to the clutches of death. But when I turned away, a figure loomed behind me, its breath cold against my skin. "Do you really think you can escape what you are?" It was the mummy again, or was it? The features seemed familiar, yet twisted. Shadows obscured her form as she leaned in closer, her resurrected essence tethered to the very darkness I loathed. "Each soul here is a chapter in our tale, consumed by their pasts. Yours has just begun. Perhaps you can help us remember." And with that, she revealed glimpses of my own history, moments of grief and despair, loves lost to the ravages of time, and the loneliness that clung to me like a specter. The revelation snaked around my heart, squeezing until I gasped for air. The ground trembled fiercely, and the barriers of my reality began to shatter before my very eyes. A series of cries erupted, joined by the howls of those still trapped, anger boiling into an insatiable rage. "Join us. Become part of the narrative, no?" I screamed, as a blinding light erupted from the darkness, forcing me to shield my eyes. In that instant, the shadows recoiled in fear, but something deeper thrummed beneath the surface. A sigh wafted through the fabric of realistic pulse I could feel in my bones. It resonated, vibrating with the promise of embrace, merging life and death. But before I could comprehend what was happening, I felt an icy hand on my shoulder. My heart stopped cold at the realization of just who had reached for me amidst the chaos. It was my own reflection, distorted yet all too familiar, the face of my future heartache screaming through the veil of shadows. "Too late. You have danced with us, and now you belong." The final word echoed as the world around me began to collapse, tearing apart, dragging in the echoes of forgotten lives, and drowning me in the promise of eternity. And then everything went dark. Silence enveloped me, a suffocating blanket that pressed against my face and chest. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, a frail reminder of life that clashed violently against the stillness. I blinked against the blackness, struggling to fight through the overwhelming disorientation that threatened to claim my mind. But as time stretched, I could almost sense a pulse lurking just beyond the veil of darkness, a flicker awaiting acknowledgement. Gradually, the void began to shift, coalescing around me, revealing what I had hoped was a mere illusion. I stood in a different part of the retirement home, the walls slick with moisture that glimmered under a pallid light seeping from an unknown source. The air was thick and tasted of iron, a stark reminder of what had transpired moments or was it days before that I gasped, stumbling backward. My surroundings were a sinister parody of comfort, with faded floral patterns clinging to wallpaper peeling at the edges. Shadows flickered in the corners, writhing like trapped creatures yearning for release. A low, mournful whine pulled at my awareness, the sound reverberating like a symphony of sorrow, growing richer with each passing moment. Did I ask anyone there? My voice trembled, barely breaking the tension simmering in the air. There was no reply. Only the distant echo of regret morphed the very fabric of reality around me, and I could feel the weight of countless eyes pressing through the walls, suffocating me in their watchful gaze. Then I remembered. The whispering shadows not merely mourned, they had been beckoning. Desperation clawed at my insides as I recalled the ethereal figures who had reached out, their pleas woven with the promise of despair. The mummy's warning rang louder in my ears. The ties that bound me to the living were fraying with every heartbeat, and I was seeking solace in a perverse sanctuary of misfit souls. I turned to explore the room. I caught movement at the corner of my eye, a flicker of something that twitched in the silence. There, obscured by shadow, stood an elderly man with a face creased by time, his eyes sunken yet lit with a spark of madness. He knelt in the middle of the room, surrounded by old trinkets, a collection of half-remembered relics that spoke of lives lived but now consigned to the ether. "Help them," he whispered, his voice a gnarled timbre that echoed with urgency, as if I could somehow salvage their fading existence. "They are lost, their stories unwritten. Wash the ink from their pages." Before I could respond, the room vibrated with an unnatural force, rattling the dust of past ills into the air. The man's frail fingers trembled, reaching toward an object that glimmered ominously at my feet, a rusted key, its surface marked by the wear of ages. It pulsed rhythmically, demanding attention, each throb laced with the torment of those who desired liberation. "Unlock their memories," he implored, his desperation palpable. "Let their voices rise." With a surge of instinct, I bent down, my fingers brushing against the key. A jolt coursed through me as the shadows retreated, revealing intricate carvings carved deep into the key's metal, a history etched in pain and solace. Goosebumps rippled across my skin as whispers surged in a deafening crescendo, vibrating against the walls, intermingling with the sound of laughter, cries, and wails long forgotten. That I gripped the key tighter, the shadows gesturing now, an orchestration of pleading desperation consuming my every thought. A multitude of faces pressed against the veil of gloom, eyes wide and mouths opening in silent screams, yearning for release. "Choose," the old man yelled, a warning woven in desperation. "With this key, you claim their stories and your fate." The whispers crescendoed into one singular phrase: "Unlock it." Just as I moved toward the closest door, my heart racing with an intoxicating mix of terror and exhilaration, a thunderous crack echoed through the air. The walls quaked violently, splintering like glass, and a chilling dread coiled around my spine. "No," the elderly man's shattered voice rang, but it was too late. In that moment, shadows erupted from each crevice, tumbling forth over one another like a tide of sin, an overwhelming tide that pulled me back. The faces became clearer in the chaos as the malice surged, their collective anguish morphing into vengeful visages, a legion of the forgotten grasping for the warmth of life, while I stumbled backward, the key slipping from my grasp, clattering against the ground. In the blur, I glimpsed a reflection in a shard of broken walla. Future me, hollow-eyed and cracked, prowled in the fog, longing to drag me into the deep embrace of despair. My heart raced as I fought against invisible hands tearing me down, and as the last remnants of light began to flicker, coalescing into a dark maw poised to swallow me whole, I screamed into the depths of the void. And oh, I will not join you. And in response, my own voice echoed, you already have. The darkness surged into a whirlpool, pulling me into an abyss where the forgotten past played witness to my undoing. And the key lay still, glinting faintly through the malevolent swell, waiting patiently for someone, anyone, to return and decide the fate of what I had unknowingly set in motion. The turmoil subsided, and silence loomed once more, thick and suffocating like a fog rolling over desolate land. Cold sweat dripped from my brow as I lay supine on the floor, heart hammering against my ribs as though trying to escape the cage of my own flesh. Shadows did not retreat this time. They merely lingered like a rabid dog waiting for me to make the slightest move. Struggling to sit up, I strained to peel my eyes from the ground. My surroundings had morphed again. The grotesque outlines of the former room were now replaced by dark, twisting corridors that bulged and swayed as though breathing. Each wall throbbed with malevolence, hues of gray bleeding into shades of black where lights failed to penetrate. The laughter I once heard from hidden places had evolved into pitiful wails, a cacophony that ignited primal fear deep within my core that I stood shakily, brushing debris from my clothes and steeling myself against the whispers that danced across the air. Unlock it, I admonished myself. Find the door. Ahead, a flicker of light glimmered through the slits of a half-open door, tinged in crimson that pulsed like an animal's weakened heartbeat. It beckoned me. I had to know. I approached cautiously, one footfall at a time, every instinct screaming to turn and flee, while an insidious curiosity spurred me forward. As I stepped into the room, I felt an invasive rush, like icy fingers snaking down my back. The chamber was bathed in an eerie glow that revealed walls lined with portraits of the residents long gone. Each face, twisted in anguish, stared down at me with painted eyes that seemed alive. The air rattled with their murmurs, fragmented memories spilling into the silence as they relived their final moments. Help us, one voice beckoned, trembling. Set us free, another intoned, its tone a deadly whisper brushing against my earlobe. My skin crawled. I approached a massive canvas that dominated the far wall, repulsed yet captivated. The painting depicted a frightening tapestry of figures trapped in an eternal dance of despair and longing. As I stared, the edges of the artwork began to ripple, hypnotic and entrancing, casting spells of dread and longing that wrapped around my chest like a tightening noose. Suddenly, a figure broke free from the painting, half-formed and translucent, collapsing across the floor before me. It was a woman whose facial features twisted in agony, her mouth opening wide in preparation for a scream that never escaped. The others in the portraits writhed as if caught in a shared agony, their expressions shifting, pleading, each asking for their fates to be rewritten. Don't leave us. The apparition rasped, extending a transparent hand that flickered like candlelight. My heart pounded in rhythm with the grotesque dance of shadows, the entities awakening beneath my feet, zipping closer. Fear wrestled with sympathy in my mind. Who can help you? I stammered, my throat dry. With collective desperation, the figures bobbed and whirled, their fragmented voices merging into an insidious chant. The walls pulsed illogically, vibrating with the energy of 1,000 trapped souls, the sound morphing to drive wedges of dread deeper within me. It felt like drowning in an ocean littered with nightmares, pulling me down into darkness filled with broken promises and unsaid goodbyes. Just as the very fabric of my sanity threatened to dissolve, the floor beneath me cracked viciously. I watched in horrified fascination as the old wood splintered, revealing a yawning chasm filled with glimmering, haunted eyes that reflected not just despair, but pure malice. I staggered back, my feet pinning me in place as 1,000 whispers ignited the air, the bitter truth of countless lives extinguished without warning. Unlock it. The cry lifted from my throat, an unconscious echo of the old man's desperate words reverberating between life and death. Grasping with trembling fingers, I reached for the heavy key that lay abandoned on the floor. Its coldness radiated through my palm. The rush of forgotten voices swelled into a thunderous roar. But, before I could steel my resolve, a shadow lunged from the chasm, grabbing at my ankles, dragging me toward the maelstrom where souls were entwined within their eternal suffering. Their agonized cries grew deafening as I clawed at the floor, fighting against the tug of despair. Then, with a final surge, the shadows twisted around me, pulling me away from the door and toward the abyss. As I teetered on the brink, the key slipped from my grasp, falling into the dark expanse below with a resonating silence, as if I had relinquished my only chance. And then I felt the unmistakable pulse of the wooden floor beneath me. It began to convulse, shifting in response to my despair, with an eerie chuckle emanating from the shadows. "You're one of us now." The ground cracked wider. The portals of the hallway erupted into chaos, sucking me closer to that hell's yawning mouth. With one last desperate gaze into the room, where the portraits twisted and beckoned, I understood that my destiny was not my own, and the unsolved mystery had merely entwined me deeper into its malevolent grasp. That I screamed, not from my lips, but from every fiber of my being, and the darkness devoured my sound, plunging me into the cacophony of the lost. The pull of that dark chasm was insatiable, and as I hung suspended on the edge, limbs thrashing against unseen forces, the last vestige of my will began to fray. Veins flared blue against my skin, pulsing desperation and terror with each frantic heartbeat. I could not allow myself to be pulled completely into that abyss. A part of me remained anchored by sheer instinct. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, I swung my body back, clawing at the ruptured floorboards desperately. My fingertips grazed the jagged edges before I imbued them with strength not from my own feeble grasp, but drawn from the voices filling the dim air, the emotions steeped in a tragic history that swirled around me. "Set us free," they begged, echoing from the walls, a symphony of despair that churned through my soul. The floor bucked violently beneath me, as it seemed to sense that I was not done yet. The mists began to thin, revealing oppressive walls festooned with the macabre finds of lives lost, tattered uniforms, rusted heirlooms, abandoned dreams left to rot. Like nails and flesh, artifacts of the past pointed accusingly, telling stories unspeakable even in whispers. And then I noticed the room had transformed. Yet again the paintings still hung, but now they dripped with blood instead of paint. Eerie reflections of lost souls addressing my every movement with expectant eyes. Their whispers were now shrieks, and the continuous chorus of help us," morphed into a terrifying symphony. A voice, deeper and crawling along the tongue of terror, beckoned from the far corner. Come join us, child." That I glanced up toward the direction of the voice. Within the flickering shadows, a gaunt figure stepped forth, clothed in shadows that ebbed and flowed like dark water. It was a barely there specter, yet its presence bore down on the room like an oppressive weight. Faces shifted behind it in the dark, mouths moving, fueling its words. The figure smiled a macabre grin that peeled back as though it intended to devour. "Do you seek to unlock their chains?" It croaked, voice grating like splintering wood. "You believe yourself strong enough to mend this shattered tapestry?" The specter swayed, fabric of its being curling towards me, enveloping my anxiety in thick tendrils. To my horror, I saw the other portraits writhing in synchronization, each face pale, void of substance, each being seemingly drawing breath with me. "You belong here," they cried in unison. "The further you go, the stronger the light becomes." "Light?" I gasped, my heart thrumming. "There is no light, only darkness." The apparition chuckled, a sound that punctured the air with a guttural hiss. "Oh, but you are mistaken. The light is here, trapped in the shadows. But to retrieve it, you must succumb. Embrace the emptiness." The words hung heavy in the air. Shadows rippled towards me closer than ever before. Tendrils of darkness reached out like glimmering claws, teasing the edges of my consciousness. They began to weave around my limbs, silken yet heavy, like the weight of an incredible burden pressed upon me. Join us," the figure coaxed, growing more distinct, sharpening like an unwelcome knife. I realized that every entity here hungered for vicarious experiences, willing to mold my essence into their own. There could be no true freedom without their sacrificial embrace. Suddenly, I saw within the depths of their endless suffering the scintillating truth buried below shame and sorrow. Gripped by a surge of compassion that waged a war within me, I understood. They were not seeking to drag me into darkness, but yearned to escape their eternal bindings. I sensed their wish to be written back into the pages of life, instead of being forever scrawled within the shadows that no. I shouted, a reflex of self-preservation overcoming the rush of empathy. The warmth fled my body, and with it, hope began to fracture. The shadows laughed joylessly, feeding off my dread, and surged toward me with renewed vigor. My breath caught as the temperature plummeted, a bitter frost creeping over my skin. I felt my heart pulse faster, almost crashing against my ribcage, and heat heightened into bolts of electricity that crackled in my veins. The room slowly imploded, dancing around me as if mocking my faltering spirit. With terror-laden reflex, I turned to the door from which I had come. Its once inviting glow now flickered ominously, revealing the jagged teeth of darkness lurking just beyond its threshold. Desperation clawed at my throat as I stumbled forward, resisting the gnawing emptiness that called to me. I spread my arms wide, drawing power from the anguish wrapped around my soul, fist clenched as the apparition lunged for me. My other hand grazed the surface of the wall, searching for balance in chaos. The lights dimmed, shrieks crescendoing into a singular sound, and every twisted face melded together in an agonizing call of longing. And just before I could cross the threshold of that cursed doorway, shadows erupted from the floor, engulfing my legs entirely, snaking upward relentlessly. There was a moment, barely a heartbeat, where clarity pierced the dark. A truth unveiled itself through the suffocating fog, lucid, until a terrible grip clamped down on my heart, constricting and cold that I screamed, fighting against the shadows that threatened to consume me once more. But their twisted laughter filled my ears, drowning out hope. As the walls closed in, I beheld a new figure emerging through the ghastly fog, tall, regal, and more malevolent than I had ever seen. "Welcome back to your darkness," the figure said, its voice wrapping around me like a silken shroud. Just as my vision blurred and darkness threatened to swallow me whole, I screamed with a plea that shattered through the monstrous noise. "I will never belong to you." The laughter erupted into a cacophony that nearly drowned out my conscious thought, but as I receded into the void, a realization struck, a fiery ember that smoldered within the depths of despair. This was not the end. An answer lurked, undefined and unmapped, waiting for the moment I would rise again, or perish trying. "Tear it down," from within, whispered a voice I barely recognized as my own, as I plunged into the depth of shadows it promised to reclaim my soul. And then, euphoria and terror amalgamated at the brink of annihilation before everything imploded into nothingness. My scream echoed one last time and silence fell. The silence was a deceptive veil, wrapping around me with a chilling familiarity. It stifled even the last remnants of my breath as I floated in a void where time seemed to slice and stretch, knotting into an incomprehensible loop. My heart thudded against my ribs, an instinctual rhythm echoing in this weightless cage. I was suspended within a nightmare, hanging between despair and the distant flicker of hope that clawed at the edges of my mind. "Not yet," a murmured whisper threaded through the darkness, laced with a twisted sense of urgency. My consciousness shimmered from the edges of the void, teasing me with flashes of memory, laughter, and more alarming, the faces of the lost souls beckoning me to emerge. Hope and dread collided, a terrible uncertainty that seized me. Gradually, shapes began to shift in the limitless black, swirling like ink dissolving in water. They coalesced to form a scene, another room with walls that pulsed, adorned with shimmering objects that seemed alive. Dim light spilled forth as if desperately escaping. It flickered like a candle about to snuff itself out, that I felt an irresistible pull toward this new realm, drawn not just by curiosity, but by a burgeoning instinct that screamed, "This is where you belong." I pushed through the darkness, each step feeling as if I were trudging through thick mud, until I burst forth into the light, only for everything to snap into focus, revealing a chilling tableau of horror. A gathering, densely packed with shadowy figures clad in rotting uniforms and frayed dresses, blinked into existence, the spectral residents of this haunted retirement home. Their hollow eyes were a mixture of longing and despair as they turned to face me. Their faces bloated with hopelessness, their mouths cracked wide in silent screams. "We are trapped," they chorused, the sound merging with the creaking floorboards. resonating with a mournful melody that sank deep into my bones. There was beauty in their pain, yet the grotesque perfection of it made bile rise in my throat. In the center of the room stood a monstrous entity, the one that had spoken before, its form shifting like a mirage, both regal and repulsive. The flickering shape settled into a spectral crown upon its head, remnants of lives stolen, and involuntary breaths caught in throats that would never again know the freedom of air. "Welcome back, dear child," it crooned, voice smooth as poisoned honey. "You come seeking light in the depths of this darkness, yet here you are, one of us. They have waited so long for your return that I don't belong here." I gasped, the weight of their shared sorrow pressing into my heart. I don't want to be caught in this nightmare. The room trembled, and the entities surrounding me seemed to swell with a pulsating rhythm, a magnetic force drawing me closer. "You must make a choice," the specter declared, grotesque joy sparking in the hollows of its shadowed visage. "Either embrace your true self, a keeper of their memories, their stories, or turn away and be lost forever." I in the backdrop, I could hear the distant ringing of a bell echoing through the corridors, like a funeral tala reminder of time slipping away. Each chime draped over me, thick and suffocating, intertwining with the despair that clawed at my throat. But something else simmered beneath the surface of that noise, a profound current pulse of power that flowed through the very marrow of the decay surrounding me. It whispered seductively of reclamation and passage, urging me to resist the suffocation, to break free and save not just myself, but all those bound here. "Rescue us," they hissed with a unity that sent chills snaking down my spine. "Become the beacon, tear down the walls, or join the shadows forever." The weight of their collective hope was overwhelming, battering me like crashing waves. Fear locked my limbs, but in the depths of my being surged a fragile ember of rebellion. I could not abandon them. I could not abandon myself. As if tethered by invisible strings, the spectral residents began to swirl in a dancing whirlwind, unearthing the memories once sealed. Within this place, revealing glimpses of their past lives, joys that melted into sorrow, laughter twisted into anguished cries. The sense of burnt offerings and the echo of forgotten lullabies filled the air, coaxing me into drowning in their tales. Suddenly, the beast of shadows lunged forward, its elongated fingers stretching toward me, the thrill of consuming power wrapped within its grip. "Seize the light," it snarled, fangs glistening in anticipation, the hunger for my essence an intoxicating poison. In that moment of crisis, clarity broke through the tumult. I could not surrender. Not today. Not when the path to liberation lay before me. Instinct kicked in, igniting pure resolve, conjuring memories of fire and rage. With a guttural scream, I could feel a devastating wave of light erupting from deep within, cascading over the huddled shadows and unraveling their torment. The specter roared in fury, but I felt the warmth seep into every corner of the room, illuminating the souls once bound by darkness. But then the world shuddered, warping as the darkness retaliated violently. The surrounding walls pulsed, threatening to collapse. Each anguished face turned hostile, distorting into sharp fangs and blazing eyes as their cries transformed into howls of rage. "Foolish child," the apparition shrieked. "You think you can tear it down? You will join us." My heart raced as the relentless rush of blackened shadows swelled around me, reaching for my very soul. I gritted my teeth, summoning what I hoped would be enough to light the way through. But before I could unleash my potential, the walls sighed and twisted with a grotesque pleasure. The final bell toll echoed as the room began to disintegrate around me into swirling darkness, where despair and light melded. I was slipping away, gasping for anything to hold on to. And just as the abyss threatened to swallow me whole, a single voice lifted above the tumult, soft yet insistent, whispering, "Remember home." Those words pierced through my very being, and in that flicker of recognition, time froze, leaving me on the precipice of a decision that would seal my fate. Would I fight to rise, or surrender to darkness? Once more, I screamed, trembling on the edge, as reality folded in on itself, making the world twist and churn. Before I could answer, the swirling mass exploded in a cacophony of chilling laughter, and I was consumed into the void, my vision fading to ink and whispered shadows. The falling bell struck one last time, and I was lost, yet found, suspended in an eternal moment between light and darkness. I woke up panting, the stale air clawing at my throat as I shot up in bed. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust to the dim light filtering through the curtains, the mundane sounds of the retirement home settling around me, the soft murmur of the residents in the common room. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but the profound dread gnawed at my insides like a hungry beast. The nightmares still clung to me, vivid and terrible. The faces of the lost, the cries for salvation, their dreadful echo fading as the sun illuminated the corners of my room. I stumbled out of bed, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had encountered. Maybe it was all just a dream. Perhaps I would step back into the ordinary routines of caring for elderly monsters. But as I trudged down the hallway, their gazes felt sharper, more accusatory, as if they knew my sins intimately. In the common room, I was met with the familiar gathering of residents. The vampire was recounting tales of a bygone era. The werewolf nodded along, its matted fur reflecting the flicker of the fireplace. Even the mummy, though her wrapping was dirted and frayed, sat quietly, her ancient eyes seeming more alive than I remembered. But one glance around made my heart sink. They were all watching me, their eyes alive with knowing and anticipation. I caught a glimpse of the door leading to the room where it had all spiraled out of control, a direct line to the abyss. The scratching and whispering still reverberated in my mind. Every feeble laugh, every brush of decay lingered in the air like the ghost of a memory. And still, that key the old man had handed me had vanished into the shadows of my folly. "Are you all right, my dear?" The vampire's voice slithered like smoke, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. Concern dripped from his words, but the glimmer in his eye spoke of an unspeakable hunger. "What do you mean?" I stammered, instinctively retreating as I felt their collective gaze grow heavier. "You seem changed," the vampire continued, a satisfied grin spreading across his face. "Have you not found what you were looking for?" My mind raced, heart pounding faster than a drum. What did he know? Was there a sinister game afoot? I could feel the sinister tension twinge deep within my gut. The laughter echoed in a cacophony of voices layered atop one another, wrapping around me, pulling me down deeper into what had become all too familiar. Then, it hit me. Realization struck like lightning. I had not escaped. I had merely retreated into a different nightmare. What they require, dear, the vampire continued, his gaze never wavering, is someone to endure the burden. Your light is one they crave. They want to be remembered. The cycle must continue. What do you mean? My voice trembled as I found it difficult to breathe, panic crawling under my skin. The vampire leaned in, shadows enveloping us both. You are now a vessel for them, dear. A keeper of their tales. They will fill you, and through you, their stories will live. Aren't you lucky? Panic surged through me as I felt the walls close in with their impending darkness. In the fleeting moments, I glimpsed the other residents, watching, waiting, hoping to reclaim their identities from the abyss. I felt their despair seep into my bones as the truth settled like lead against my chest. The cycle, I was now bound to them. No, I screamed, not only for my sake, but for theirs, desperate to resist. But as the laughter crescendoed, the mummy reached out, her bony fingers grasping my arm, holding firm. "Fight if you wish, child," she rasped, her eyes glimmering with an innate sadness. "But remember, fighting is what binds us more tightly together." The other residents began to chant in unison, shadows writhing as they consumed me whole, their voices harmonizing into a macabre melody. "Join us. Live through us once more." Their breath brushed against my skin, soft yet suffocating, a veil of despair woven tighter as I began to struggle against the tide. "That you are us." They howled, a grotesque symphony that drowned out reason, just as I thought I would vanish. Into the darkness, a flicker of defiance ignited within me, a call to resist, not just for myself, but for them all. I staggered away, grappling against their grasp, fueled by the fire of survival. "You can't keep me here. I will not be your vessel." But it was too late. As I screamed, the realization dawned me. Attempt to resist only invited more shadows to encircle me, pulling me deeper into their malevolent embrace. The laughter swelled around me, pounding into my ears, drowning out every thought left clinging to my sanity. And then, as the darkness consumed my very essence, a chilling voice whispered within the tumult, "Welcome home." Everything went black. And I, now forever tethered, understood that I had become the new keeper of their Talisa monster among monsters, trapped within the very fabric I had tried to escape. The walls closed in as their stories flooded my mind, rewiring the remnants of who I was. As the echoes swirled into a dreadful symphony surrounding me, the realization settled deep in my bones: the horror never truly ends. It merely reinvents itself in the most twisted ways. Which meant, one day soon, I would pass this curse on to a new visitor, just as the mummy had passed it to me. "Welcome home," I murmured, hearing echoes ripple through the ether, my voice blending with the darkness as the cycle continued.